And she goes down on this play in obvious pain. If you don't want to see the look on her face, you can look away. Clutching at that right knee. Clearly in pain.
JuJu Watkins goes down with a brutal injury during March Madness, the kind that stops the whole arena cold. Caitlin Clark does what any respectful athlete would do. She sends her love, says the kid will come back stronger, and keeps it classy. But somehow, that one word, kid, triggered a full-on social media meltdown. Accusations of racism, condescension, gatekeeping, you name it, it's flying. What was supposed to be a moment of unity just turned into one of the pettiest, most toxic internet dog piles we've seen in women's basketball, and it says a lot about the state of the sport right now. Let's break this all the way down. So let's rewind real quick, because this whole thing starts with something nobody wanted to see. We're in the thick of March Madness. USC is battling it out with Mississippi State. The energy's high, the stakes are sky high, and then, boom, everything changes in a split second. JuJu Watkins, USC's star freshman, and one of the most electrifying young players in the game, takes a hard fall. You could feel the tension the moment she hit the floor. She grabs her leg. She's in visible pain. And just like that, the game stops feeling like basketball and starts feeling like a nightmare.
There's no way to spin it. She's carried off the floor there. And it's just a bummer.
The arena goes quiet. Teammates surround her. Coaches kneel beside her. The broadcasters are silent for a beat. Everyone watching, whether live or on screen, just felt it in their chest that this is serious. Now, if you've been following women's college hoops at all, you know how much JuJu's been carrying USC this season. She's not just good, she's a problem. She's been dropping 20 and 30-point games like it's light work, leading her team like a seasoned pro, even though she's still just a freshman. So this wasn't just a tough break for her. This was a gut punch to the entire tournament, and immediately, you saw the basketball world rally. Teammates were emotional. Fans from both sides were sending love online. The sports community, at least for a moment, came together the way it should when a young athlete goes down. Because this wasn't about team rivalries or stats anymore. This was about humanity, sportsmanship, and hoping JuJu's okay. This is the moment that should have united everyone. But little did we know, it was about to become something much uglier. Now this is where the story should have ended. A star player gets hurt, another star shows support. End of story, right? Unfortunately, not even close. Because what Caitlin Clark did next was what any decent, respectful competitor would have done. And somehow, that single kind-hearted gesture turned into the spark that lit a wildfire. Let's lay it out clearly. Shortly after JuJu's injury, Caitlin took to social media, specifically Twitter X, and posted a quick message. It wasn't performative, it wasn't some PR-crafted thing. It sounded like her, straightforward and sincere. Here's what she said, word for word. Sending all my thoughts and prayers to JuJu. Kid will come back stronger than ever. That's it. That's the entire message. No hashtags, no photo op, no weird tone, just support. And let's be real. That's exactly what you'd hope to see from one of the faces of the sport. Caitlin's not just any player right now. She's the one breaking records, selling out arenas, dragging women's basketball into the mainstream spotlight, whether people like it or not. And yet, through all the pressure and attention, she's consistently shown maturity and sportsmanship. This moment was no different. The word kid in this context, totally normal, especially in sports circles. Athletes, coaches, broadcasters, they use it all the time. You'll hear people say stuff like, that kid's got heart, or watch out for that kid next season. It's a compliment. More often than not, a way of saying someone's talented, promising, still growing. Plus, Caitlin's a couple years older than JuJu. They're not the same class, not the same age, not on the same team. There's no reason that word should raise any red flags. If anything, it shows a little bit of admiration. It's like, this kid is tough, she's gonna bounce back. And in those first few minutes, that's how most people took it. The post got thousands of likes and retweets. People were responding with praying hands, heart emojis, even messages like class act, and that's why you're the GOAT. It was a rare, wholesome moment on Twitter. Two athletes on opposite sides of the court, but united in respect. But as we know, Twitter doesn't stay wholesome for long, because then, almost out of nowhere, the microscope came out. A small but very loud group of users started zoning in on one single word, kid. And just like that, Caitlin Clark's supportive tweet became the internet's next controversy. What started as a classy gesture was suddenly being spun into something it absolutely wasn't. And the backlash wasn't just annoying, it was downright absurd. So Caitlin Clark tweets out a simple, heartfelt message, and what happens? She gets torched for it, not for being fake, not for clout chasing. No, she gets dragged for using the word kid. That one word becomes the lightning rod for a full-blown social media meltdown. You start seeing tweets pop up, and it just kept snowballing from there. People started projecting all kinds of intent onto Caitlyn's message, saying she was being patronizing, arrogant, even racially insensitive, like she was somehow trying to diminish JuJu by using a word that's literally used across every locker room in the country, from high school to the pros. And let's be honest here, this wasn't coming from JuJu. This wasn't something she publicly took offense to. This was a crowd of online commentators twisting a supportive tweet into a weapon and putting words in Watkins' mouth, without her saying a thing. Now look, do people have a right to interpret things differently? Sure, that's the nature of social media. But this was a reach of Olympic proportions. Nobody was focusing on Caitlyn's actual intent, which was clear. Instead, they were playing linguistic gymnastics, trying to make kid sound like a coded insult, like it was some devious way to downplay JuJu's talent or maturity, and it didn't stop there. Some started pulling the race card, saying that because JuJu is a young black woman and Caitlyn is white, the word kid takes on a different tone, that it has a history, that it's dismissive. And while yes, context and tone matter, this clearly wasn't that moment. Caitlyn wasn't talking down. She wasn't flexing seniority. She wasn't even trying to make herself part of the spotlight. She just wanted to say, hey, you're strong, you'll be back. But instead of being praised for good sportsmanship, she was put on trial by people who were already looking for a reason to be offended. And that's the real problem here. This wasn't an honest misunderstanding. This was a coordinated pile-on, fueled by people who already had it out for Caitlyn Clark, people who see her as the face of a new wave they're uncomfortable with, and they're itching to drag her for anything. The wildest part? If JuJu had tweeted something similar after Caitlyn got injured, using the word kid, this wouldn't even be a conversation. Nobody would have batted an eye. The double standard is loud, and this moment, it didn't just expose how reactive and unfair people can be, it exposed how desperate some are to tear Caitlyn down, no matter what she says or does. They're not here to protect JuJu. They're not even really here for the sport. They're here to feed the outrage machine. And Clark, unfortunately, has become one of its favorite targets. Now let's take a step back and be real for a second. Because if you've ever watched sports, played sports, or even just been in a locker room, you already know this. Kid is not an insult. It's not a dig. It's normal. In fact, it's practically part of the language in sports culture. You hear it from coaches all the time. That kid's got heart. Watch that kid. They're the future. Man, that kid's gonna be a problem in the league. And it's not just in basketball. LeBron James has called younger players kid multiple times on national TV. Kobe used to say it. Steph has said it. Analysts use it every day on ESPN. It's a word that's almost always used to praise someone who's younger but clearly got next. And look, Caitlyn Clark is what, 22? JuJu's 19? That's a pretty normal age gap in sports terms. She's not calling a peer a kid. She's calling a rising freshman phenom a kid who's going to come back even better. It's not condescending. It's literally acknowledging the obvious. JuJu's a young star with a bright future. There's no hate in that. No shade, no superiority complex, just respect. The whole kid controversy completely ignores the intent behind the message. It's like people zoomed in on that one word and blocked out everything else. The prayers, the heart emoji, the tone. If you actually know how athletes speak to each other, especially across generations, it makes total sense. Veteran to rookie, senior to freshman, the word kid is practically built into that dynamic. It's the kind of thing you'd hear in post-game interviews. That kid gave us a tough time tonight. She's got next. That kid is cold. No one ever pulls the disrespect card in those cases because they understand the context. They understand the culture. But suddenly, when Caitlyn says it, now it's a problem. Now it's patronizing. Now it's something deeper. It's like people wanted to twist her words, like they were waiting for a slip-up. And when there wasn't one, they invented it. So let's call it what it is. This wasn't about the word kid. It was about who said it, and the fact, and that some people already don't like her. And that brings us straight into the bigger issue. The double standard Caitlyn Clark keeps running into. Every time Caitlyn says anything, it's like people are just waiting to pounce. You remember, last season, she was getting elbowed, hip-checked, targeted on the court. And the same folks who are offended by a kind tweet now, they were silent back then. Or worse, they defended it. That's just part of the game. She talks trash, she can take it. She's not above physical play. So when she's getting shoved around physically, it's fine. But when she tweets something supportive and calls someone kid, now people want to act offended? Make it make sense. This pattern keeps showing up. Caitlyn Clark is held to a completely different standard. Every move she makes is dissected. Every word she posts is turned inside out. People dig for something, anything, to flip on her. And here's what's really wild. It's not just coming from opposing fan bases. Some of it's from people who claim to support women's basketball, people who talk about growing the game, empowering athletes, building community. But when the one player who's bringing in the most fans, the most media attention, and the biggest viewership in years does something positive, they look for a reason to tear her down. It's like she's being punished for being too good, too visible, too popular. And what makes this whole thing even more ridiculous is that there's zero indication that JuJu Watkins herself took offense. No response, no shade, no unfollow, nothing, because she knows. She knows the language. She knows the tone. She knows Caitlyn wasn't coming from a place of disrespect, but people online, they ran with it anyway. They wanted there to be tension. They wanted it to be a controversy. It's not even about Caitlyn versus JuJu. It's about a crowd of people who are uncomfortable with what Caitlyn represents, and they're just looking for reasons to drag her every time. And that leads us right into the next piece of this, the culture clash. Because this isn't just about a tweet, it's about something way bigger going on in women's basketball. All right, so let's go even deeper, because this situation, it's not just about a tweet, or a word, or even Caitlin Clark. This is about a full-blown culture clash happening right now in women's basketball. And honestly, it's been building for a while. See? There are two distinct groups colliding. Here, on one side, you've got the long-term fans, people who've supported the WNBA and women's college hoops for years, even when the stands were half empty and the games barely made it to TV. On the other side, you've got the new wave, the Caitlin Clark effect. Millions of fresh eyes tuning in for the first time. Fans who maybe didn't grow up watching the WNBA, but are now all in because of what she's doing on the court. And here's where it gets messy. Some of those long-time fans, not all, but some, feel like this is their space, their league, their community. And now it's being flooded with a bunch of new voices, new fans, new energy that doesn't fit what they're used to. So what happens? Gatekeeping. Caitlyn becomes the symbol of that change. She represents the shift, the spotlight, the sponsorships, the national attention. She's breaking viewership records. She's on magazine covers. She's getting brand deals the league's never seen before. And to some people, that feels like a threat. Because instead of being excited that women's basketball is finally getting its moment, some are focused on who is bringing the attention and whether or not she deserves it. You start hearing comments like, she's only big because she's white. She's overrated. There's better talent that never got this hype. This ain't her league. She's just the media's pick. That kind of talk? That's not about basketball anymore. That's about identity politics, about culture wars, about discomfort with change. And it's not just fans stirring the pot. Some players and media voices have subtly, or not so subtly, echoed the same sentiment. It's not always direct hate, but it's those little jabs, the coded language, the backhanded shade that says, you don't belong here, not like that. So now, everything Caitlyn does, good or bad, gets filtered through that lens. If she celebrates too much, she's cocky. If she doesn't say anything, she's cold. If she shows support, she's being fake or patronizing. There's no winning with people who already decided they don't like her. And that's exactly what we're seeing with this kid controversy. This isn't just a Twitter spat. It's a reflection of a deeper divide in the sport. Old guard versus new wave. Gatekeeping versus growth. Exclusion versus expansion. And let's be real, that's not just bad for Caitlin Clark. That's bad for women's basketball as a whole. Because if we keep fighting each other over nonsense like this, we're gonna miss the bigger picture and the massive opportunity this moment actually holds. Look, when you strip away all the noise, here's what actually happened. Caitlin Clark saw a fellow player go down with a tough injury and sent her love. That's it. That's the tweet. And somehow, that became another excuse to twist her words, question her character, and tear her down. But let's be real. This was never about the word kid. This was about a group of people who already made up their minds about Caitlin Clark and were just waiting for a moment to pounce. And they found one, or thought they did. The reality is, she's done nothing but carry herself with respect. She supported her teammates, uplifted her competition, and brought more attention to women's basketball than we've seen in years. But for some people, that's not enough. For some, she'll never be enough. But if you actually care about the game, not the drama, not the culture war, but the sport itself, then this is the moment to speak up. Because women's basketball is growing fast. It's entering a new era. And whether you're Team Caitlyn, Team JuJu, or just Team Basketball, we need to stop letting the loudest, angriest voices hijack the narrative. So here's what I want you to do. If you're tired of fake outrage, hit that like button. If you believe in uplifting the game instead of tearing players down, subscribe right now and drop a comment below. How do we create a better, healthier space for these athletes and the fans who love them? Let's change the energy. Let's support the game. Let's support all of these women, because they're out here giving everything they've got. We owe them better than this.